The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your financial advisor. We have officially entered the summer months, but with all the fun that may lie ahead, is your emergency fund able to handle the unexpected? Whether it's a broken AC unit, needed car repairs ahead of your annual family road trip, or even an unexpected medical expense, it's important to make sure your emergency fund can handle whatever this summer may throw your way. Joining me today is Andrew Wood of Daniel A. White and Associates. How should the amount saved in your emergency fund change based on the season or maybe ahead of like an anticipated major life event like kids or marriage or moving?
Yeah, Alyssa, it's a really good question, and we see a lot of different things. When we're meeting with clients and people that come into our office, I think the first and foremost is just making sure you have an emergency fund, and just having a plan for the unexpected. And unfortunately, a lot of times, we don't really do that as a society in whole, in general. So I do think it's important to build that emergency savings. One of the things, especially, when we're looking into the summer months, I'm 41 years old. I got a daughter who, she's in daycare, but, now we have summer camp. And a lot of things do come up, just your regular summer expenses. Like, again, kids are home from school. What are they doing? Is there a pool membership? Are they going to be home? And if they're home, typically that means that they're going to have higher food bills,
Right.
Grocery bills. Are there summer camps? Are they playing sports and they've got travel teams and things like that? So, I think it's important, you should have a plan going into the summer, at least, as to, what's taking place. What are the kids doing? Do you have travel plans? But I do think it's really important to make sure that you're building a budget. And instead of, putting things on the card, build that fund specifically for the summer expenses. But I do think it is important to keep that separate from having your general, home emergency fund. Because let's face it, I mean, your air conditioner can go in the summertime, but, at the same time, your heater could go in the wintertime. So, I don't know how much the season's really going to affect those random expenses that pop up throughout the year.
And I think a lot of people struggle in general, like you were saying, to even have an emergency fund. Maybe for people who feel like they're living check to check, do you have any advice on how they can start saving or building one?
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, it comes back down to budgeting expenses. I look at it this way. I haven't had cable in 4 years for a number of different reasons, but, phone bills, the subscriptions that you're not really using, if you think about it, that's kind of wasted money, especially if you're not using it. If you can put away $20 a week, $50 a week, $100, whatever it is, if you can eliminate some of those those expenses that you're not really using, and just try to put that away, put it into a separate emergency savings account, keep it separate from where you're paying your everyday bills, and just have it automatically going in there. I think that's really important.
Yeah. You were talking too a little bit about like having multiple emergency savings funds. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, me personally, so, I think about, what are we going to be doing, whether it's this quarter or in the summertime, having some kind of set savings account that's designed specifically for, the travel and some of those planned expenses. But, me personally, I'm not going to tell you how much it is, but I do have an emergency fund, that is just a household emergency type of situation. So, again, I mean, we typically know when, like, a roof, for example, is going to need to be replaced. So you might, set aside some money for specific things. But I can't tell you how many times I've run into people that have tree issues, right? A tree falls, or, I really got to get these trees out so they don't fall. Right.
Right.
So, keeping that separate, because those are, usually one-offs or just random events where you have a storm and next thing you know, you got a $3,000-$4,000, expense just to have a tree taken out or removed. So I think it's important to, again, set aside, different buckets where you have a general household, emergency account just for, everyday things, right? And then you have specific things that you might want to plan for, like a vacation or like a roof that is upcoming. But again, the biggest issue that I see is we as a society, it's more of like, we put it on a car, we pay later, we worry about it later versus,
Yeah.
actually attacking, the issue itself.
Yeah. With the kids kind of now at home more than they are during the year, do you have any tips maybe as a parent or as an advisor that families can maybe take to save money but still like keep the kids entertained?
That is a really good question. It's funny. Like I remember at least leading into, we'll call it like teenage years when I started to work.
Yeah.
I mean, I had help. I mean, I should say my parents had help. I had a great aunt who I saw basically every day. And I'm the youngest of four, so I had a brother that, we were closer in age, so it was us two. And, my aunt took care of us, during the day. We didn't do very much. We had neighbors, kids that we used to play football with and run around and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like things have changed a little bit to where, we have to maybe put more of an effort to get people out of the house, get the kids out of the house and hopefully have a little bit of fun versus being behind a screen all day.
Right.
But in terms of trying to save money there, it's really tough. And again, even just like the online stuff and video games, I'm pretty sure now you have subscriptions and you can click something on your phone. Next thing you know, you're getting charged for an app or something like that. So, I don't know how you do it, but, try to monitor that stuff. Because, I've heard horror stories about, this child or grandchild. Next thing you know, they have, a few $100s racked up on an app for buying things on an app with a click of a button. So
Gosh,
it's kind of scary, but
yes, those are horror stories. There's so many times I've heard like news stories of parents saying a couple thousand has been charged on their credit card.
Yeah,
because of video
games. We didn't have that issue. We woke up 7 o'clock in the morning, ran down the road, and we didn't come home sometimes until dark.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the world has certainly changed, and everything is now the phones and the iPads and stuff like that. So just me personally, my neighborhoods, it's kind of tight. So we have the ability to talk to our neighbors and kind of set a plan where it's like, okay, well, make sure our kids are getting together at least a couple times a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Getting out of the house, going to the park, doing things like that, so they are out of the house and getting away from some of that stuff.
Yeah, you're kind of leaning on your village.
Of course, yeah. But we're fortunate. I know not everyone has the ability to do that, so I'm sure it's challenging. But that's where hopefully you have family that can get involved, grandparents, aunts, uncles, things like that. But yeah, I do think it's really important to try to figure out, all right, so how do I inexpensively get the kids out of the house?
Going back to like the summer camp expenses that you were talking about, that's pretty a popular thing that parents do with their kids. Maybe if you're going to send your kid to summer camp or it's something that they go to every year, or maybe even if it's your first time, how early should you start kind of putting money away for that?
Sure, that's a good question. Obviously, a lot of it's going to come down to cost. But, I will tell you, like, so for child and daycare, quite frankly, I'm going to be saving money. So my usual check that's going out towards daycare or whether it's tuition or whatnot, and obviously there's public schools, so, obviously there's not a monthly tuition check that's going out that way. But, for me, I didn't really have to plan for that. I mean, I knew we were going in, but, within our current budget, it's actually a little bit of a cut to our costs.
Yeah.
Because, the summer camp is going to be a little bit cheaper. But, especially if you have, your kids go to public school, for example, you're not paying that monthly whether it's a monthly tuition check or quarterly tuition check, yeah, I mean, that's where the planning has to come in play, because now all of a sudden you're paying, right? You're paying for these things. So, obviously the earlier the better, but, look into the cost beforehand, and try to say, all right, well, if I know it's going to cost me $1,000, whatever it is for the summer, how much do I need to put away again per week or per month? That puts us in a position so we're not putting it on the card.
Yeah. I
the
think
credit card.
that's probably the biggest mistake, is people just over relying on that credit card.
Yeah.
What do you think is the most common financial emergencies that people tend to overlook in the summer or other times of the year?
It's good news, bad news, and I'll tell you, it's just even car insurance. That bill that pops up. Sometimes people pay it monthly. The good news is if you pay it every 6 months, at least it's only twice a year that you have to do it. But that every 6 months, you have to you have to make sure you're aware that bill is coming up. But you look at that. I look at cars for that example, but you look at the insurance. Even think about tires, right? Think about tires are what, just for a new set, you're talking at least usually $1,000, right?
Yeah.
So, that's an expense that can pop up. There's just so many things that pop up that you kind of are aware of, but we try to kick the can down the road and just kind of wait until it happens. But again, if you have these expenses coming up, make sure you're getting ahead of it, you're aware of it, and you're setting up a plan to make sure that you're not putting it on the card. I look at the cars, the vehicles, but other than that, you're looking at, the AC and the heater, hot water heater, those types of things. But usually, those have an expected, lifespan on those. So again, you should be able to plan ahead for that.
Yeah.
The most difficult ones are going to be more, I would tell you, from a medical expense, those types of things that pop up. I don't know, statistically, what happens. I'm sure, I guess, in the winter times, people typically do get more viruses and they get sick. So, but again, we don't know what's going to happen there. But those are some of the random things where, emergency room visit or whatever it is, that do pop up.
Yeah. Do you think people should create a separate budget for the summer months? Or do you think that's overkill?
So again, I think you have to have a budget, for what is coming, what's going to happen, right? So again, the memberships, the camps, make sure that you're planning for those. I agree with keeping that separate from just having it, your general house emergency type of fund. But I guess the problem would be is if you combined everything at once, and next thing you know, you have an emergency and that depletes, the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you have an emergency at home, and next thing you know, you can't, fund the summer expenses.
Yeah. Summer vacations are usually a big thing with the kids being home. Maybe what are some red flags that you can't afford to go on a trip?
Red flags that you can't afford a trip?
Yeah, that maybe you shouldn't go, if you're late on credit card payments maybe, or if you're noticing hey, we're living check to check.
Yeah.
What are some maybe things that people should pay attention to, I guess?
No, yeah, you're spot on. So if you're already, close to maxing out credit cards, or you're carrying a balance every month, to me, that's a red flag. It says that you're already living, you already can't pay the bill, right? You're just putting it off. So adding to that is only going to make the situation worse. So, in a situation like that, obviously you want to take your trips. You got to enjoy your life. You got to live your life. But, sometimes that might mean, all right, maybe we don't do an upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we take us, whether it's a smaller trip, maybe we don't, we don't fly, that type of thing. But yeah, if you're carrying a balance on your credit card, I think that's for me, at least, it tells me that, maybe we can't afford, taking, the fancy trip, or the extra special trip. Maybe we just do something that's, whether it's more local or something that could be a little bit more inexpensive.
Yeah. Plus, like a lot of communities have, fairs and little festivals and stuff that's free kind of right where you live. So I think probably looking into those could be helpful too. I think like social media, everyone feels this pressure to go on these big trips and like show, look at my life and what I have and what I'm doing. And then it just perpetuates bad spending habits.
No, I think you're right. I think sometimes we focus on, the fancier, the more elaborate things, but I can tell you some of the best experiences that I've had in my life. And I think, so far in my daughter's life are the little things.
Right.
I mean, this isn't the summertime, it's the end of summer, but like just something as simple as a Renaissance fair right down the road, I mean, that can get expensive too. Don't get me wrong with all the vendors and stuff, but, just hanging out, looking at people in costumes and the performances are really cool. So, I personally like the little experiences. Our biggest trip that we take every single year is just a camping trip. There's no electricity, no running water. Going into that, obviously there's an upfront cost, but we're not really spending any money up there. But it's some of the best experiences that I have every year that we've been doing ever since I met my wife, and it's been amazing. So I look forward to that trip more than any other trip that I have during the year, and that is our least expensive trip.
Yeah, those are the best just to unplug too. Going up north in the summer and just unplugging.
So think about it. I mean, I don't want to knock Disney or anything, but I haven't taken her to Disney World. But for me personally, and I think, of course, the experience is tremendous for kids, but it's really expensive. It's going to Disney World. But you look back, you can look forward a week from when you get back to Disney. Did it really matter where you were?
I know. It's
crazy.
It's
It's spending the time together. Me personally, I would much rather be in the woods and on the water or on the lake or whatever, relaxing versus being with thousands and thousands of other people that are running all over each other.
Yes. So. Oh, it's crazy. I've only been to Disney once. My parents took me and my two sisters when we were younger, and my sisters are younger than me. They were probably like maybe 3 or 4 when we went. Like they were little, and they don't even remember it. And I know that was like one of the biggest, one of the most expensive trips we took in our childhood. Yeah. And it was crazy because we were there on New Year's Eve, so they were doing like the fireworks show in Magic Kingdom. And I remember looking over at my sisters, and they were just like sitting on the ground, like zonked out over it. So that's really a good point. I think people, feel like they've got to take the kids to Disney or, do these quote unquote landmark trips, but who's to even say your kid's going to remember it or appreciate it?
So think about this, right? I mean, whether it was myself or, just other people that I know, I mean, think about those situations where maybe you don't have the money, right, to go on a fancy trip. But how many people do you know, or how many friends that have a vacation home, right?
Yeah.
Or they know someone that has a vacation home. Maybe you reach out and be like, hey, we want to plan a trip. And typically, that's going to save you some money because you have a contact, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe it's even free, for at least the room, the room. You know what I mean? If you can rent it or not rent, maybe it is a rent, but a discounted rent, if you go to a friend's place.
Right.
So I think, I don't think you have to be shy, right? I mean, half the time people are excited to share their vacation homes with people, even if it is for a minimal cost or even for free, because they want people to experience the same experiences that they have there. And a lot of times these places are just vacant, right? So wouldn't you rather your place be used?
Right.
Then you're spending just vacant all the time?
Exactly. Yeah. Spending money on the upkeep of it and all that for it to only be used like 30% of the year.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I'm fortunate. My parents actually live in South Carolina, and we call that a vacation. But it's a week out of the year that we're able to go towards the beach and spend time with them, and it's at minimal cost. So I always enjoy that too.
Yeah.
But it's not like we're going out of our way and spending an extra few $1,000. just for a trip or a vacation.
Right.
Now, some would argue that's not really a vacation because you're with family and things like that. But
Yeah.
we have a close family, so for me, it certainly is a vacation.
Yeah. Are they by the beach? Because if I see water, it's a vacation for me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's everything I have for you. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to throw in there, or any maybe like just advice for people as we get into summer, for any financial tips you might have?
Well, again, I liked the topic just initially because just the idea of an emergency fund is really, really important. Just the idea of building out a vacation fund or an expense fund, for those types of things is really, really important. But unfortunately, we don't see it very often.
Yeah.
Right. And I will say that people that are better off financially long term have typically taken those steps. So they have built out those emergency funds. So they're not going into debt, when they want to take a trip or when an emergency around the house does happen, they have a plan in place for the unexpected. Right. So, and those people, 9 times out of 10 are much better off, long term with their overall finances. So just the idea of having an emergency fund, it might seem foreign, right? Everyone knows it's a good idea, but they don't implement it. So I highly recommend, just making sure that you are prepared for the expected as well as the unexpected.
All right. That does it for this edition of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.